So this is the first way consciousness is primary. Consciousness is in everything. And the second bit is the opposite is also true. Everything is in consciousness. By which I mean, whatever we experience, whatever we know, is actually an appearance in the mind. When we look at the world, we know, and this is something science cannot deny, it looks at this a lot. The neurosciences explore this in great depth. In fact, it was really the beginning of psychology 150 years ago. Experimental psychology was looking at how the image in the mind relates to the world out there. We assume that's what happens. We know it's what happens. When you're looking at this world now, looking at the screen, looking at the room, we know what is going on is that light comes in through the eyes, hits the back of the retina, triggers electrochemical impulses which travel down nerve fibers to the back of the brain, where the brain very cleverly, in about 1/10 of a second, puts it all together and says, this is what it looks like out there. The brain creates its own image of what is going on out there and very cleverly ties that in with the sound it hears, the feeling of sitting in the seat, whatever else, and creates this wonderful three-dimensional, hi-fi, surround sound, touchy-feely, virtual reality which we live in. But we're about 1/10 of a second behind reality the whole time. We're never quite in the now, try as we may. Well, we are in the now in a different sense. So, again, this is something science cannot deny, but it never explores the implications of this. Everything we know is an experience in the mind. That's all we ever know. It's the forms which consciousness takes on. So you could say experience is an informing of consciousness. And I like to think another meaning of information is the process that happens in the mind. Information is the formation of form, is the creation of form in the mind, the process of form arising in the mind. And this, again, I think is something which many of the mystics, teachers have seen. I remember the Maharishi used to say something I didn't understand at the time, was knowledge is structured in consciousness. I mean, that everything we know is actually structured in consciousness. The stuff of our experience is, some people call it mind stuff. It's one of the words for consciousness in Sanskrit, chitta. Chitta is the stuff, the mind stuff, which gives rise to all these different experiences. And this was something that was realized 200 years ago by Immanuel Kant, who said there were two parts. There's the noumenon, what he called the noumenon, which literally means that which is perceived. We could call it the outside world, the thing in itself. And then there's phenomenon, which literally means that which appears, and that's the representation in the mind, the forms in the mind. And what he realized was that we never know the thing in itself. All we ever know are the forms which appear in the mind. This was the basis of his philosophy, and it started off a whole string of philosophy in Europe at the time, and debate and stuff. But the two are different. I think Eastern philosophy gets at the same sort of thing when it talks about Maya. Maya is often translated as illusion. A better translation, I think, is delusion. We delude ourselves when we think the appearance in the mind is the thing in itself. This is the delusion. And what science tries to do is to work out what the thing in itself is like. So a lot of physics is trying to work out what is the noumenon, what is the thing in itself really like. And it turns out it's nothing like we think, nothing like we experience. I mean, a good example is now, you're seeing blue on the screen, bluey green. There's no blue there in reality. There's light reflected from the screen. That light has a certain frequency or a certain wavelength, which triggers certain receptors, but they aren't blue receptors. The electrons that go to the back of the brain aren't blue electrons. The blueness is purely a quality that arises in the mind, in experience. The same with sound, music. As air vibrations, the music is an appearance in the mind. So what we start realizing is the world out there is actually nothing like our experience of it. And the fundamental mistake, I think, that we make the whole time is we literally mistake our experience to be a representation, an accurate representation of the world, rather than realizing it's just our experience. The world itself is nothing like our experience. And this is what physics is beginning to realize. So we think we're seeing the world out there accurately. We've no idea what's actually there. There's something there which we perceive, which gives rise to color and shape. But what it actually is, we don't really know. Whitehead saw this. He said the mind experiences qualities which are purely offspring of the mind alone. And the mistake is we take those qualities and think they exist out there. You know, when we look at matter, we used to think that matter was a nice little solid particle. The Greeks thought an atom was this lump of matter, because that's what we have in the mind, that matter is solid. And then we realized that it was composed of lots of different particles clumped together, electrons, protons, neutrons. And then we began to realize that most of it was empty space. About 100 years ago, we realized it was more something like this. And in fact, if you made the nucleus of an atom the size of a golf ball, if you blew the nucleus up to the size of a golf ball, electrons would be like peas flying around about 300 feet away. So it's like a baseball stadium with a golf ball in the middle and atoms flying around the stands. That's how much matter there is in an atom. 99.9999999% empty space. And that's not even true. We now realize that even the electrons and protons don't actually exist. They're not particles. We call them particles. They're not actually particles. They're eigenvalues in a wave equation, which means absolutely nothing to you non-mathematicians and means very, very little to mathematicians. It really means it's the chances of our observing something. There doesn't seem to be much there. As Hans-Peter Dürr said, whatever matter is, it's not made of matter. This is a physicist talking, remember. Matter as we know it exists only in the mind. So what can we say about the nature of the noumenon, about the nature of reality? It's not matter. What can we say about it? Well, if we come back to this, if I'm looking at any of you, I don't know the truth of your body. It looks solid, it looks colored. I know that in the physical world, it isn't. There's something there. I don't know what it is. There's electromagnetic fields, whatever they are, other fields creating this form, which functions very nicely. The only thing I'm prepared to say with certainty is that I believe you are a thinking human being. I believe you are experiencing. So I believe you have your own world in there. But there again, I have no idea what that is like even. I don't even know what goes on inside your mind. I assume there's a mind there. I assume you're not zombies who just laugh at the right things. The only thing I can say for certain about you is there is consciousness. Just as that's the only certain thing you can say about yourself. The only certainty is there is consciousness. Now, if consciousness goes all the way down, this is not just true of dogs and cats and fish and everything else. It goes right down to the fundamental level. There's consciousness at this level. Whatever is happening at the quantum level, we could say there's some sort of interiority. Proto-mind, whatever you want to call it, proto-consciousness, some vaguest glimmer of an interior world there. And yet there seems to be nothing there. This is another assumption point in science. We assume that there is an objective reality.